Right. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the English Language Testing Society monthly webinar, this month on designing reading tests, and it's it's sponsored by the SPA, or Speaking Proficiency Assessment. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to start. We're going to talk a lot about reading tests. We're going to talk about defining the construct of reading, and then we're going to talk about designing texts and items for reading. But I'd like to start out with a little discussion today. So let's look at these questions and just see what you think. So I'd like everyone to please join in. The first question is, what role does the learner's competence in reading in their L1 play in testing L2 reading? So who would like to make any kind of comment about that? Any ideas? So again, let me maybe simplify that a bit. How important is the learner's or the test taker's skill in reading in their own language? How does that affect testing reading in a second language? Any ideas?
Mike?
Please.
Yeah. So in my opinion, maybe what learners they do, they usually compare with their mother tongue, the text they have, and they might expect the same kind of questions, or similar scenarios or similar questions, I don't know, or similar expectations. So always, what I want to say, always the L1 has a big impact on the L2.
Okay. What about their reading competence in L1? How could that affect their reading competence in L2?
Well, sure, it affects, but I don't know how to say.
Okay. Any other ideas?
Okay, can I?
Oh, please, anyone.
Okay, so I think concerning the effects of L1 on testing L2 reading, the first thing is about the comprehension. So sometimes students may transfer the L2 to their mother tongue to understand, first of all, before answering some questions.
Okay, I'm thinking more about that. That's fine. I'm thinking more about their competence in L1 reading. What's the relation between their competence in L1 reading and their competence in L2 reading? Do you have any thoughts about that? Well, let's move on to the next question. Maybe we can come back to this one, because these are actually important questions. What about general language proficiency? So if we say that a learner is intermediate or upper intermediate, or if we say he's a B1 or a B2, how does that influence his competence in reading?
So it has to do with the complexity of ideas. So if a student is, for example, in a high level, so he will be able to understand complex ideas in a text. However, if we are dealing with a beginner, it will be difficult for him or her to understand the ideas expressed in a text.
Okay, and what's sorry, go ahead, Mohammed.
And also the complexity of the sentences in a text. So this may affect reading that text.
Okay, and how is the complexity of sentences that you mentioned? How would that be judged? What makes a sentence complex?
Maybe sometimes just the length of a sentence it may affect.
The length of a sentence. I think we can also think about the grammar. We can also think about
Yes,
vocabulary, right?
Yes, yes.
And we can also think.
Too.
Sorry, again, Mohammed.
Maybe punctuation too. It has an effect on reading. So the way if they understand different punctuation signs and marks, it will be easier for them to understand and to read correctly. Maybe.
Okay. And I think also it's not only at the level of the sentence, because, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, is that there are things going on that are greater than the level of the sentence. When we start connecting sentences and creating coherence and cohesion,
Exactly.
right? We need to think about that as well. And so actually, this is a big debate in testing reading, is to what extent do we believe, we as educators and we as test writers, to what extent do we believe that reading in the L2 is affected by the student's competence in L1? And to what extent do we believe that a general language proficiency in the L2 has an effect on L2 reading? So how much, in other words, how much is it a general competence in reading, no matter what language, just a general reading competence that we're testing? And how much are we testing elements of the L2 language through the medium of reading? But we might be able to test those through the medium of speaking or listening or any skill. We just happen to be testing them through the medium of reading. This is a big issue, and this is going to affect how you write your reading tests. What you believe about, what you believe, and I can't give you any answers here, but what you believe those answers are, I might have a very different idea from you. But what you believe those answers are is going to affect the way that you write reading tests. So another question, what sub-skills might we want to test when we test reading? If we're designing tests, we're of course, we have certain targets in mind, right? And often those targets are sub-skills. What sorts of sub-skills are we really looking for? And again, if anyone wants to answer.
Can I?
Anyone, please.
Maybe maybe looking for the main idea of the text, maybe looking for ideas of the mini paragraphs in a text. Maybe you want to test students in skimming or scanning to look for details in the text.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Mohammed.
Yes, actually, maybe we might we might measure and evaluate the vocabulary knowledge, some references. Okay, for example, we have in referential test, for example, what does it refer to? Okay, some pronouns, some relative pronouns, some clauses. So I think it's a kind of integrative test. Okay, it measures vocabulary, grammar to some extent.
Or so apart from skimming and scanning, maybe also you can test the sub skills like intensive and an extensive reading.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we've touched on a number. Let's go ahead and look at a construct definition, or a possible construct definition, about micro skills and macro skills in reading. And I think when we design reading tests, we probably want to consider, what it is we're testing, and what is the reading skill really. And these micro skills are sometimes called bottom-up reading skills. And these macro skills are sometimes called top-down reading skills. So let's just have a look quickly. This is a long list, but I want to spend some time with this. So those of you, looks like many of you are Arabic speakers here. So you know already, no one has to tell you that when you are reading in English or when your students are reading in English, that you're using a different alphabet, right? So the first thing that our second language readers need to do, if they're not, we have some Turkish people here who share my alphabet. So that we can just jump over this step. It's very easy. But for many people who speak Arabic or Japanese or Chinese, they need to first just recognize English letters, right? And that's not a given. This is something we have to learn. And also letter combinations. And even if you speak Turkish, for example, because we have some Turkish speakers here, or it could be French, or it could be Italian, we don't always use those letters to represent the same sounds in English that we do in other languages. So all of these things, all of these associations of at the level of just individual letters is a micro skill at a very low level. We would also expect our readers to have sight recognition of a core set of words. So they should not be looking at every word like this and that and sort of looking at the letters and figuring those words out. They should be able to just see this, that, egg, mother, desk. They should just be able to see those as a whole word and immediately recognize them. They should be able to read fast enough that they don't forget what came at the end of the text. What became at the beginning of the text by the time they get to the end of the text. So speed is important. They need to understand as they're reading what is a noun, what is a verb, what is an adjective, what are the roles of individual words playing in a sentence, and how of course do they connect. They need to recognize word forms as well. I'm giving you some examples here, like works or worked or working, all have slightly different meanings from the root word work. Or houses or gyms, apostrophe S, shows us something a little bit different from gym. Or preschool tells us something a little bit different from school. They need to also not only things like houses and works, but works is a verb, isn't it? Not only things like houses, but they also need to be able to recognize irregular plurals and irregular verb forms. Of course, they need to comprehend at the sentence level. They need to understand the role of structure words, right? And also linking words and phrases. And that's when we're talking about connecting sentences. And that's when we leave this level of the sentence and start talking about larger parts of discourse where more complex meaning is created through ideas, complex ideas that are at the level of the paragraph maybe, or at the level of the whole text and are connected through these linking words and phrases. And also, of course, to comprehend common expressions that might not have a literal value, to understand idioms, and also remember phrasal verbs are such a hard thing for our second language students. So these are a lot of the micro skills that we might feel like we need to test in when we test reading.
Mike,
please.
Can I say something? So the points you're mentioning, they really demonstrate that this is where the skills overlap. So this is not only about reading comprehension, it's also about grammar, pronunciation, because when you talk about, for example, nouns, verbs, adjectives, okay, and or how sentences are formed, then this is about the grammar. So there is an overlap here between reading comprehension and the other skills, like grammar.
Absolutely, but ultimately, and I think that's Haran, that's a great question. So let me just back up a little bit. So this is a possible construct definition, and before we can test anything, we need to define what it is we're testing. So without defining what we're testing, how can we have any validity in what we're testing when we haven't defined it? So this is a kind of construct definition. But I think ultimately, when we talk about reading, we're talking about constructing meaning in the mind of the learner or the test taker, or actually construction of meaning is a learning outcome. But measuring that construction of meaning would be the testing outcome, right? So all of these things that are mentioned here under the micro skills, I mean, it might be a grammatical element, but I don't want to suggest that we're only trying to test grammar. What I'm suggesting is that they may need to use a grammatical element to construct meaning in their mind, because ultimately, when we test reading, what we want to test is not their grammatical knowledge, it's not their vocabulary knowledge. Those might be additives, but we want to test their ability to comprehend written, language in its written form. And that's really what testing reading means. But let me just give you the example. Sorry.
Michael, can we say that, okay, the reading comprehension test is a kind of integrative test because it measures more than one element, vocabulary, grammar, and somehow syntactic knowledge?
Right. So integrative tests are a kind of tests which are different from communicative tests, which are more modern style of test, and also discrete point tests, right? So discrete point and integrative and communicative tests would all claim to measure reading. So I'm not sure that I would put testing reading in one basket. I think that all those kinds of tests had ways to test reading, and they have they make arguments for why their way of testing reading is a valid measure. So I wouldn't say that it's only integrative, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to go on to one more thing, which is we're going back to this idea of grammar and like knowing word parts that Harwan brought up. Let's take a word like table, and the book is on the table and our students will understand. But what if we use that word as a verb and said the discussion was tabled, and suddenly our students may not understand at all what that refers to, because we're now using this word that they've learned as a noun, but we're using it as a verb, and it has a very different meaning as a verb, right? So I think there is some importance in recognizing what is a noun and what is a verb in a sentence, because it can sometimes change the meaning. So all of these micro skills we can think of basically as a bottom-up approach. And now let's look quickly at the macro skills, which are like the top-down approach. So once we've sort of thought about these micro skills, let's think about recognizing genre and rhetorical conventions of text and its implication for meaning. So the way that a letter is written or an email is very different from the way that a textbook is written, or it's different again from the way a detective novel is written, or it's different from the way that a description of a painting in a museum is written. So every one of these writing forms that I just referred to has a style or a genre, and they might have very different conventions, right? Also recognizing the communicative function of text. So is this text, is it serving to entertain us, to inform us, or persuade us, essentially, right? Is an aspect of comprehension, really, right? If we know what is the function of this text? Understanding inferences. So remember, not only do we read the words, but we also need to read between the lines, because certainly the author has intended inferences in his writing. Also using personal background knowledge and also general world knowledge, because every time we read, we're not simply adding up the words. It's not like a math problem where we just add up all the words in the sentence and come out with a meaning. We also are we're bringing our world knowledge to any sentence to really make sense of it. And I'll just give you the example that if you take the sentence, "The cat is nice," very simple sentence, right? We might find that in a grade 1 reader, "The cat is nice," or "The chicken is nice." Those have very different meanings, don't they? Right? Because the cat is nice refers to a pet, and maybe the child likes to play with it. The chicken is nice refers probably to a meal, and someone's eating that chicken. So even then, we have to bring our world knowledge to to the text and understand that chicken is something that we probably eat and a cat is something we probably keep as a pet, right? And I'll just jump down. You can look through these, but I just want to jump down to the last one, which is using a variety of reading strategies to interpret texts. And that includes skimming and scanning, pre-reading titles, headings, charts, and graphs. These are all skills that we use to interpret a text before we do an intensive reading of the text. And this is part of the reading skill. Also, guessing meaning of unknown words through context, and also deciding when you can skip an unknown word, and it's really not important to the general meaning of the text, or when you really need to figure out what that word means. So all of these skills help us all of these points help us to build up an idea of what we mean when we talk about testing reading. So this is a kind of construct definition. Now, and the next two slides are from the CEFR. I want to talk about what the CEFR refers to as domains of reading. And there are two general domains and two academic professional domains. So when you want to select a document, when you're trying to create, either selecting or creating a document, that document, you probably want to make it look like something authentic, even if it's not authentic, right? So what kinds of texts would you use? And of course, this depends on a lot of things, the level of your students and your purposes. But let's think about the personal and public domains, first of all, right? Where would we acquire texts? Or if you're writing your own, what kinds of texts would you create? It could be personal letters and emails, text messages, notes left around the house, greetings and holiday cards, writing on packaged products, receipts, instructions, medical and financial forms, car documents, driving documents, a document related to renting a house. These would all be examples of things that we may ask our students to read in the personal domain. Moving on to the public domain, we might see signs in shops and public spaces, street signs, maps, public announcements, labels, leaflets, schedules and timetables, advertising, notices, regulations, menus, and sorts of those, any kind of document or brochure you might see as you're traveling, right? As well as newspapers, magazines, books, online reading. Those newspapers, magazines, those would all be examples of general reading, not academic or professional reading. So those we could all consider public documents as well. So if you want to create reading texts, you might consider any one of these sources, these kinds of sources. If we look at professional and educational, where do we find professional or occupational texts? In offices, factories, shops, places of business, government agencies. And we might think of business letters, reports, contracts, regulations, instructional manuals, all these kinds of things, professional correspondence. And of course, most of these are going to be at a much higher level than what we saw before. Educational texts. Of course, the classic is textbooks and reference books, but also journal articles, abstracts, online scholarly text, and even student notes and whiteboard notes could be examples of educational texts that students might need to read. Okay, so again, these are just some domains that we might draw from if we wanted to think about what kinds of texts our students need to read. And we probably want to be as inclusive as we can. Given our students' level, we probably don't want to, we don't want to show students only email as an example of reading, or only textbooks as an example of reading. We probably want to give lots of different kinds of sources. Okay. Any questions or comments about that before we go on? All right, let's go ahead. And I think someone referred to this already, so let's just quickly look at types of reading, like skimming, scanning, intensive and extensive reading. And for those of you who may not be familiar, I just want to go over these ideas really quickly. So skimming refers to looking at an entire document in order to get a general understanding of its contents, right? When might we skim? We might skim a magazine article or a contract or a recipe, right? Scanning is very similar, but it means looking through a text to find specific information in a very short amount of specific information in a specific place, and then reading intensively. That's reading that small part intensively. So, for example, if we're looking at a print newspaper to find a phone number of a cinema, for example, that would be an example of scanning. If we're looking through a textbook to find the answer to a study question, that could be an example of scanning. Intensive reading, which is often our goal when we test reading, when we work with reading in class, and then when we test reading, our goal is often intensive reading, where students have a short text, and we would expect them to have a complete understanding of all the main ideas and all the details. And that's probably the classic. Intensive reading is probably the classic kind of reading that we test. And finally, extensive reading, which I don't know how familiar any of you are with the extensive reading theory. Many people believe that it should not be tested. Sometimes people do test it. But extensive reading really refers to reading for a general understanding of longer texts, like a long magazine article or an entire book, right? And when we do extensive reading, we expect that a lot of the details will just be forgotten, or we might ignore them. All right, so that's a lot about construct and about what it means to read. Because again, if we want to test reading, we have to have an understanding of what that means. And by the way, if anyone has any questions or comments, please just go ahead and shout it out. So otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead. Any comments at this point? All right, let's go ahead and talk now about text and item design. And there, I think we really want to divide, or I would like to divide our discussion into of designing. Sorry, I want to talk about texts first, about selecting texts. And I want to divide it in, there are basically two ways that you can select text. You could either write them yourself, or you could find them. When we find them, we're using authentic texts. And and there are a lot of advantages to authentic texts, but there are also some disadvantages. It seems that those advantages are self-evident, right? I mean, if we want our students to read things, or if we want to test our students' reading, we would like to show them things that really exist in English. It's a very obvious reason to use authentic texts, especially at the intermediate and advanced levels. At the beginning level, it might not be possible to do that. We can look for authentic texts, but actually, so we can look for authentic texts in newspapers, magazines, short stories, extracts from novels, and short and nonfiction, websites, correspondence, advertising. These would all be great sources of authentic text for intermediate and advanced readers. We could even, and I'll show you some examples in a few minutes, we could even select authentic texts for our beginner students, and we'll have a look at that. So what are the advantages of authentic texts? Well, of course, they're authentic. That is an advantage in itself, because that's a principle that we believe in, of showing our students things that are real, not things we've created just to test them on, right? Again, they're good for upper level students and to some degree intermediate level students. And they're very practical for us as test designers, because we don't need to write them. We just find them, although finding them is sometimes difficult itself. But we don't need to sit down and write a whole text. We can find them. It's very practical, very easy, right? But it may be necessary to edit any authentic text. We may edit it only for length, or we may have to go back in and simplify the language. We may want to substitute easier synonyms for some high-level vocabulary or low-frequency vocabulary. And we might even want to simplify the grammar a bit if we feel that it's just beyond our students to really, if we don't expect our students to be able to get through that sort of text. So I think a really good thing to do with authentic texts is sometimes to modify them for our students.
That's a great idea. Mike, may I add something?
Please.
So I think what teachers, they really struggle with is they know that authentic texts are great and they've got some advantages, or the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. But the problem is sometimes they find it really difficult to find the right text for the right group of students and for the purpose that they want to design their reading comprehension.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's why they will go for their own texts. However, I don't agree with them, because when you write your own texts, then you might sometimes make mistakes, okay, or people, they find mistakes in your text, because especially if you are a non-native English speaker or English teacher, then it happens that you make some mistakes, or maybe you will not consider all the points in testing and reading comprehension, or in writing text for reading comprehension test.
Harun, I absolutely agree with you. And we'll look at our next slide on constructed text. But yeah, not only if you're a non-native, if you're a multilingual and you're teaching in your country, you may not have the confidence to write your own text. That's true. And even native speakers, when they write, what they write is often not a high quality. It's not as good as published texts, right? And the other thing is, I think there's a kind of danger that we write our texts in order to create a certain grammar point. So we might try to include a lot of present perfect or something like this. So it's no longer very authentic like at all. It's sort of a rather than testing reading, it's this concept of input flooding or grammaring, where we're just trying to like give them the grammar to test the grammar. And that's not really what we want to do, right? So absolutely, Harwan, I agree with you. I just wanted to present both sides. So, but I think there are advantages of authentic text. Let's look at some other disadvantages. One, the high level of language might be difficult, right? So you might struggle to find texts that are suitable for your purposes. Again, if you're outside of England or America, you might find that the cultural references are unfamiliar to your students. So, I'll give you an example of a text I worked with not long ago that referred to interchangeably to California and the West Coast. And how can we expect our students in another part of the world to understand that California is a synonym of West Coast? I mean, we don't expect them to know that. So this kind of cultural reference can make them appear that they're not reading as well as they might be reading. I just had a student today that didn't know that Bangkok was in Thailand and kept confusing Thailand and Taiwan. Now she's from Oman. I don't expect her to have a grip on details of Southeast Asian geography, and that's not our point. If I was teaching a geography class, then it's not an English class, right? But again, this text had these references. The text expected the reader to know that Bangkok is the capital of Thailand. Never gave them that information. So these kinds of things, that's a disadvantage of authentic texts. And again, you select an authentic text and it may just not contain the elements that you want to test, or it may not contain enough of them, which is why you could also consider constructed texts. What are constructed texts? You write them, or maybe you have a textbook where they're printed for you. You don't have to write them, right? What are the advantages? But often you'll find yourself writing them. And as Harwan said, if you're a non-native speaker, you might feel like I can't do this. And I think you're really underestimating yourselves. I think you can do it, but I understand.
Mike, might I add something else?
Please.
There's one more thing that teachers, they face, the English language teachers, is that even when it comes to authentic texts, if they find it online, they are not sure whether the text is in the level of their own students or not. So they are not sure. So whether this up to their level or below their level. So they haven't got that skill, or it's not easy even to say that. So that's why sometimes they refer to textbooks rather than online texts from online.
Harwan, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's not only non-native speaker teachers. I mean, I am surprised when I choose, and I'm a native speaker, if you don't know, I am surprised when I select a text, what my students understand that I didn't think they would understand. And I'm surprised what they don't understand that would be really easy. So, you know, there's no way for you as a teacher to know this. The only way is to try it out on real students and see what really happens. And that's why I think pre-testing is so important. You know, you're not going to be sure about anything until you try it out. And it's always a surprise to me what words I thought students would know, and they're just completely stumped, and what words I thought would be really difficult and everybody knows. And you know, I'm not a really young guy, so if it comes to technology, there are words I don't know that my students know, right? They know all those words, and I don't know what half of them mean. Yeah. So let's go ahead and look at constructed text, which is, you know, what a lot of you are probably going to be doing. And again, you might find them in your textbook or you might write them yourselves. If with the advantages of constructed text, you can build in elements of grammar and vocabulary. You can put the exact vocabulary that you've been studying in the lesson, in the unit, you can put that into your text. That's great. If you've been working on a certain grammar point, you can build it into your text, right? The constructed texts are really good for our beginning and intermediate level students, where they're probably going to have a lot of trouble with any kind of authentic text. And just as Harwan was saying, you can control the level of input according to your needs. Now, I do want to give a tip here, and that tip is in red. If you are writing your own text, and there's nothing wrong with that, I'm just offering these two. I'm not saying one is better. I'm just offering these two ideas: authentic text, constructed text. But if you are writing your own texts, I would suggest that you try to build in authentic features of language. Try to make your constructed texts authentic in some way, right? If it's an email, make it look like an email and use the kind of language that people would use in an email, right? If it's supposed to be from a textbook, use longer sentences, use more complex sentences, use more passive voice, these kinds of things. Make it look like a textbook, even if you write it yourself. Try to build in some authenticity. What are the disadvantages of constructed texts? Well, you know, they're not authentic. That's goes without saying. And very practical, they're just, it takes a lot of time to create them. It's out of your workday to sit down and write those texts. Any other comments about that before we go on?
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
By constructing a test, you mentioned only authenticity. What about the other principles of language assessment? I mean, are we going to pay attention to them at this point or this level, or after we choose the text and start writing the items or the questions? For example, the reliability of that test, the validity of that test.
Right. So I just wanted to talk here about authenticity because, and remember, there's both text and task authenticity. And here, really, the only thing I'm talking about is text authenticity, because it's a consideration that you may want to use authentic texts. But we're still here talking about constructing text. And today, I think what I really want to talk about is constructing reading tests. So validity and reliability will come. I mean, reliability will be measured after we have created our tests and pre-tested them through a statistical analysis. So that comes a lot later. Validity is our most complex concept when we think about principles of assessment. And we need to build in validity at every stage in the process. And we need to, ultimately, there's no statistical measure of validity. We need to build a validity argument. So we need to sort of explain to any stakeholder who may ask why our test is valid. But that's not something we can talk about in just, well, we could, but it's not something I wanted to talk about a lot in text construction, reading test construction. But those are certainly important variables. And so is practicality, right? And so is test security. I mean, and I'll just throw that out right now. If you're writing any kind of test, when we talk about test security, if we're writing any kind of test that you're going to use again and again, if you want to write about dogs, or that's too general, if you want to write about German Shepherds, don't go to Google and type German Shepherd and take the very first article like that pops up, because what are your students going to do? They're going to find it in 2 seconds, right? At least go to like the 3rd or 4th page of Google with your German Shepherd article, because make it a little harder for them, right? So that's a really good point about security, test security. When because if the test is not secure, then it's not valid, right? It's not valid, it's not reliable, right? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mike, may I add something? May I ask a question here? We talked about this issue. So I think, in my opinion, I might be wrong. Well, the text is not that important, the text you bring. The kind of questions you ask is really important. What kind of question you ask, what you ask about, and how they respond to the questions, or how they understand, comprehend the text. So I think this is the issue.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, to be honest, I would say they're both important, but we're going to talk about item design next. Absolutely. So let's go ahead. I just want to give you some examples. And if you look at our screen, what are we looking at here? What? Anyone have a guess about what this is?
Low-level authentic texts. It's written.
Yeah. If you did want to use authentic texts at a very low level, these are just some examples. So look around you. Where do you find writing? You see in the upper left a street sign. That's writing. In the upper right, a shop, a sign in a shop window. That's writing, right? A pancake recipe. That's writing. And this one, a little note. Kevin called. He wants you to call him back. Maybe your friend left you that note, right, by the phone. That's writing. Someone has to read that. And a very nice kind of reading test for lower level students, if you look at the one right in the middle, is where they have to draw a picture. But to draw the picture, they have to read those instructions. Okay, so this would be an example of reading instructions, which is a kind of reading. Yeah.
This is really interesting to me, because I don't know why always we as teachers, when we talk about reading comprehension, we always refer to texts. So whether short or long, but these are really great examples that notes, we can refer to notes, sign, posters, pictures with little of words or sentences. They're really great examples, and they're also reading.
Exactly. Why do we always think of text? Because we're teachers and we're like bookish people, right? So when we think of reading, we think of books. But there's, look around you in the world. Where do we see writing? We see writing everywhere, right? Exactly. Let's go ahead to task and item design now, which is what Harwan was asking about. So let's get to it. What kinds of items? How can we test? So we have a text. We use our items to get into the text, to get an idea of what's going on. Because remember, ultimately, construction of meaning is something that's going on inside a student's head. We will never see it. It's not like writing or speaking where we can actually get a language sample. We will have no sample. We're trying to make an inference about something that's going on inside the student's head. And to get into that, we need items which they answer. Multiple choice items are really good for testing main ideas and details. True false is really good for also testing main ideas and details, probably more details, but it could be main ideas. And if you think true false is too easy, one criticism of true false, it's too easy. They have a 50% chance of getting it right. If you add true false no information, then that reduces their chance of them getting the answer right by guessing, right? So they have to decide, is it true? Is it false? It contradicts the text, or does the text simply not really even talk about that, right? A good strategy for testing main idea of paragraphs is a matching exercise where they have to match a kind of a heading or a very short summary to the main idea of an entire paragraph. If I don't know how many people have seen, I think this is a really good testing design. I don't know how many people have seen summary completion. So the idea is we read the text, there's a longer text, say it's 4 or 5 paragraphs, and then we create a summary of the text in just one short paragraph to summarize the text, but we leave some blanks. And the students have to go back in the text and they have to find the words to complete the blanks in the summary. And this is wonderful because it tests skimming and scanning. It tests reading for details. It tests vocabulary. And it also tests the student's ability to guess vocabulary from context. If you leave out words that they probably already know, you're pretty sure they know those words, then you're more testing skimming, scanning, and details. If you leave out some words that they may not know, right, some of the more difficult words, then you can actually test their ability to guess the meaning of vocabulary, of unknown vocabulary from context, right? That's a little bit harder to do, but it's possible. So I think this is a wonderful testing style, and it's often, I've seen so many tests written by so many teachers that are just multiple choice, but we have so many other formats. So does everyone understand this idea of summary completion? Any questions about that?
Yeah, I know what's it. I mean, what's our summary completion?
You use it.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you like it?
Well, I don't like it because the students they find it difficult. It's really difficult because it's maybe rather designed for upper intermediate level or maybe higher, because the student, they really need to understand the text first, then being able to complete the summary. So it's not that easy. But one thing, if you don't mind, I would like to mention here. So I know there these types of tasks are really basically designed for the purpose of improving the learner's language proficiency. Mm-hmm. But I think we as teachers have to be really realistic when even it comes to choosing the tasks for students in reading comprehension sessions or tests. Mm-hmm. What I mean, in reality, students, they want to see where do they really, what kind of tasks do they really face in real life. For example, in reality, some people they usually read, for example, this package, they want to really understand, for example, how the syrup should be used. So I think we have to design tasks that, for example, they really reflect real life interaction or real life situations. Mm-hmm. So, for example, reading leaflets. So in real life, we often read newspapers, leaflets, people, they ask about it, how, for example, this can be used. Okay, how many doses you have to give to your child? So then you have to read it, understand. So we have to, I think, design questions based on this one, the text here.
Yeah, Harwan, I'm gonna
more meaningful. They really like it.
Harwan, who are your learners for the most part?
Well, my learners are the undergraduate university students, but they're going to be, they're pre-service teachers. So they're
Okay.
going to be teachers of kindergarten from K to 9. So that's why I'm thinking of very young learners or learners from primary level learners and secondary level learners.
Right, right. So yeah, I'll tell you, I have, and I think you're making a really good point, and it's sort of a task-based approach, which is that's wonderful. I have a kind of a bias because I do a lot of large-scale commercial test writing, so I have a kind of a bias towards things that are easily measurable. That's my own bias, but I don't disagree with you at all. I'm sort of talking from my own experience here, and I approach it in a different way. But I agree absolutely with what you're saying. Sort of hands-on, task-based, very practical. Yeah, and then we can talk about that whole issue of when in classroom-based testing, our goal is not always to measure student performance. Sometimes it's to test in order to encourage student learning. I think we have to think about both sides of that. There are times when we do need to measure performance, but I think there are also times when we can use tests in order to promote learning. So let's go on and look at some more task and item designs, if you're willing. So those that I gave you on this slide are very, very easily measurable. These are perhaps a little more difficult to measure, but maybe going more towards what Haran is saying. So short answer items where you ask a question, students have to read something and write out a short answer in order to show details. Summary or summary response. How many people have used a technique of having students summarize a writing in order to demonstrate their comprehension? Or a summary response, which is where they not only write a summary, but they add their own opinion. And this is a kind of task which is sometimes called reading into writing, where we try to connect reading and writing. If we want to try to measure their comprehension of text organization, we might have them outline a text. They may have to create the outline themselves, or they might have to fill in an outline that's already partially completed. Okay. And of course, when they're doing that, we're also testing for main ideas and details, but we're also able that way to test for their comprehension of text organization. And another more creative testing style is to take a text, and going back to that idea that yes, we're not talking about pool rules here. We're probably talking about paragraphs, maybe, right, from a traditional book source. What if we ask our students, what if we give them all the paragraphs, but they're out of order? And we ask them to put the paragraphs in order. And here we're really testing for main ideas and text organization, and we're testing for that largest part of comprehension, where students need to be able to see the flow of ideas from beginning to end, or that kind of coherence that we create in a text, right? Or that we should be able to understand in a text. And if you want to try this one, I would really suggest that you give them the first paragraph and the last. If it's 7 paragraphs, give them the first paragraph, give them the last paragraph. Don't expect them to put those. And then the other paragraphs, give them the paragraphs, but they have to put them in the right order. Okay, this is another way of testing reading. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. Any comments and questions? Any comments and questions about that?
Can I jump in?
Please, we would love for you to. Azida.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have just one question about what you have just said. I don't know if we ask a student to put sentences in order to have a coherent paragraph. Is it a writing test or a reading test? Because they are going to use sentences in a paragraph. So Is it reading we are testing here or writing? I am confused.
So Hazida, I'm just curious, where are you zooming in from?
From Niger.
From Niger. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, that's a really good question. So we're not asking them to produce language here. We're only asking them to read and organize text. So I have two answers for you, Hazida. One is it's a reading task, because what we're asking them to do is to recognize a logical flow of information. So we're essentially asking them to organize paragraphs to make a coherent whole. And this would be a kind of reading task. But Hazida, I think it's a great question. And when we think about it, and I think this is the wonderful thing about reading and writing, anything, and I always remind my students of this, anything that we read has been written by someone. And anything that we write, we intend for someone to read. So reading and writing are two sides of the same coin. So in some way, Hazida, is it a reading test or is it a writing test? Does it matter? Because maybe it's both, in a sense, right? Is that a negative thing? And I don't think it is a negative thing. But in my way of seeing the world, I would say that when they are given language and they must work with this language to create some meaning, it's reading. When they must produce language, it's writing. That's the way I would see it. Hazida, you are more than welcome to disagree with me.
Thank you, and thank you a lot again for the answer.
You're welcome. And if you have a different answer, that's a wonderful thing. That's really. All right, let's go on. I think that's our last point. Just talking about, and I'm going back to, I think it was maybe Mohammed who talked about this. So when we think about reading and the principles of assessment, right? If we use selected response format in our reading tests, we have guaranteed a high level of reliability. And also they're very practical because they're easy to score if we're using a selected response format, right? These are some of the advantages of reading tests. High reliability, very practical. But we are not necessarily generating a lot of construct validity in that case. So we would like, if we do want tests that conform to all these principles, then we would like to build in validity. And how can we build in validity? We would like to use authentic texts. That's one way to build in validity. If we don't write our own and we use authentic or at least modified authentic texts, they're more valid in a sense, right? If we use contextualized texts, if we have these discrete point tests where every question is about one sentence and they're very decontextualized, it's not very valid because it's decontextualized. So by using contextualized texts, we are building in validity. And again, including if we are constructing our texts, building in features of authentic writing. So trying to make them more authentic, even if they're not really authentic. These are all ways to build in authenticity and validity into our reading tests, which are already going to be performing very highly in terms of reliability and practicality. Let's try to build in those things that they may not do automatically. Okay. All right. I want to again thank SPA for sponsoring this webinar. I'd like to thank all of you for attending and for your participation. I especially want to thank Hauran for his participation. He gave so much today, and I want to really call out Hauran because. So thanks for listening. Thanks for participating. See you next month. And next month, Hauran is going to be a guest webinar host. So I will not be the host next month. He's going to be our guest host, and he's going to talk about making grammar and vocabulary tests more interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward, and I hope you are too. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I will see you next month. I'll see you next month.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Have a good time. Bye bye.
Thank
everyone.
you.